Puerto Rico. My name is Jocelyn Pizarro, and I have a message for you regarding climate change. A little bit about myself before you feel like this is another person trying to tell us how to run our country. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I still have family members there, and learning about Puerto Rico and how climate change is specifically affecting Puerto Rico and its citizens has become very near and dear to my heart, and I felt like I should spread and share the message with you guys so you can both become very passionate about the subject as well because it's affecting your everyday lives. So yeah, you might be thinking, you're just another tree-hugging hippie. You care about the environment so much, and what does this have anything to do with me? And actually, I'm just like you. I actually got a little bit educated throughout this course that I've been taking. So I'm going to tell you what it has to do with you. Our homes, our cars, factories, electronics, boats, everything that we use today, a lot of the things that we use today emit carbon into the atmosphere. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means that over time, temperatures are increasing. And what in the world does this have to do with Puerto Rico? So I'll tell you this. Surrounding waters of Puerto Rico has warmed by nearly 2 degrees since 1901. All right, 2 degrees is not a big deal, right? Wrong. It is a big deal. And we'll go into that later on throughout this presentation. Sea levels have increased 10 feet every decade in Puerto Rico. You remember when you were playing on the beach as a kid and you can no longer play in the same place? The sand seems like it's going deeper into the ocean. That has to do with the water temperature increasing and glaciers melting. And according to the most recent census, almost half of Puerto Rico's population are considered to live below the poverty level. And why am I bringing this up? I'm definitely going to go into that too. Because the temperatures are increasing, we have severe floods, and if you have been living in Puerto Rico or have any family members in Puerto Rico, you know that there's been a lot of hurricanes lately. And there's drought. Have your parents ever told you or anybody in Puerto Rico that their water has been turned off for days because the government has had to step in and control what's going on with the drought? I remember that. So we'll go into that as well. Before I go into how ocean temperatures increasing are directly affecting Puerto Rico as a whole, I'm going to tell you a little bit something about what I call the ripple effect. So, what is the ripple effect? Well, when temperature increases, what is the result or the cause and effect of that? Well, we have ocean temperature levels, the surface of the ocean, anyways, increases as well. There's a little thing called coral bleaching, and the temperatures that increase, a little bit about how hurricanes form, which I'll go into later here, cause more hurricanes to occur for longer periods of time and bigger hurricanes, which leads to increased floods and floods and temperature rises like this cause loss of infrastructure and lives. All right, Jocelyn, I hear you talk about a lot of problems. And how does this directly affect me? You're talking about the ocean, you're talking about hurricanes. Okay, I get how that can impact me directly. But how does this impact Puerto Rico? Why should you care? So the next few slides are going to show some graphs collected by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and these are specifically tailor-made to Puerto Rico. They gathered data over the years to present these graphs. So here in this specific one, you can see a change in annual surface temperature for the oceans in Puerto Rico from the 1900s to 2000. You can see that 1 to 2 degrees that we were talking about earlier in the slide. And what does this mean? So when there's an increase in surface level temperatures, you have a thing called coral bleaching, which I'll go into, severe floods from extreme weather, like hurricanes, which we'll describe as well, and stronger and more frequent hurricanes. So for those of you who don't know how hurricanes are formed, they're formed over the warm ocean water. of the tropics. And then when the warm air over the water rises, it's replaced by cooler air. So then having warmer water will continue or prolong a hurricane and make it even stronger over time. This graph here talks about the projected change in sea level increase for San Juan, Puerto Rico. Have you ever thought about as a kid, if you ever been to Puerto Rico, if you were raised there, or if your family lives there, people keep on saying that the ocean is coming in, the ocean is coming in. And I mentioned before that the sea level temperatures are rising and glaciers are melting, and this is causing a ripple effect. What happens when the ocean temperature increases? The amount of oxygen dissolved in the ocean is reduced, and this impacts the life in the ocean acidification. What does that mean? Coral bleaching is exactly that. Coral bleaching is when life cannot be sustained due to low oxygen in the ocean, and the coral reefs die out. And why is that important? Well, if coral reefs die out and they provide a source of nutrients to other fish and other wildlife there, that means that wildlife is dying as well or migrating somewhere else. That is less food and less natural barriers. So coral provide natural barriers so that the ocean is not coming in as much, right? So right now we have 60% of the population in Puerto Rico that lives near the coastline. 60%. Thus, 60% of the population that can be affected by the ocean tides coming in closer and closer over the years, which right now it's about 3 feet every year. We have damage from erosion. So the more water that comes in, the less people can live closer to the waters, the more homes are destroyed. And because I mentioned that the population lives below the poverty line, do you think it's feasible for people to move or to relocate just as easily as others who are not as disadvantaged economically? So think about that. It's all a ripple effect. This graph represents the type of cyclones and events that have occurred in Puerto Rico over time. As you can see, from the 1985 to present day, they increased dramatically. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the temperatures increasing cause hurricanes to happen more frequently and cause more damage because they're prolonged. So one recent event that happened in Puerto Rico that was completely devastating, the Irma and Maria happened back to back. And Hurricane Maria alone caused millions of Puerto Ricans to evacuate the island and come to the United States. There was a lot of economical damage in the infrastructure, and it cost about $90 billion for Puerto Rico to fix what's been going on. It caused damage to the electricity, the electrical grid. Everybody knows PREPA is the sole provider of electricity in Puerto Rico. Gone. Many went without food, without shelter, without clean water for months. And so, do we really want more hurricanes like Maria to continue to happen and affect your population of Puerto Rico? Hopefully, some of the information I provided earlier and some of the statistical data that was gathered can rise up a passion in you to think, man, like I have family members there, or this was my home growing up, even though I may not live there now. They're being directly impacted. And these are recent events that we're talking about. This is not something that happened a long time ago. This has happened within the last 5 years. So, what can be done? It's such a big problem. We can't control the weather. We don't know what's happening. We can help contribute to global warming or to those things that we mentioned earlier before. So what can you do It's important to mention that a third of emissions of carbon that's emitted into the atmosphere comes from cars and boats alone. So everybody rides a car, or a lot of people ride cars. And think about Puerto Rico, it's an island, so it gets a lot of its produce and its goods from shipments that are not from Puerto Rico. But what can the people of Puerto Rico do? Have you ever been to Puerto Rico and seen somebody riding a horse, or a lot of the youth riding horses on the streets? It's not very common in the United States, but it's very common in Puerto Rico, at least where I grew up. I still see people going to McDonald's riding their horses. That could be something that individuals can do instead of riding their cars. If they can ride their horses to go to the local McDonald's, or for leisure, instead of taking their cars. You can walk more or ride your bikes more often. Has anybody ever seen in Puerto Rico that you have a lot of local merchants selling crabs or quenepas or mangos? You have a lot of farmers markets in Puerto Rico that produce, the island itself produces many goods. It produces things like sugarcane, coffee, bananas, plantains, pineapples, corn, spices, avocados, so on and so forth, yuca. People make a living because the soil is so fertile. And so instead of going to big providers like Walmart, which might be actually more expensive than buying from your local merchant, it's easier to buy from the merchant. That'll help reduce carbon emissions. That would help reduce also the price. Think about the prices that increase from having to ship goods from one place to another, and then the cars that it takes, or the trucks that it takes to get to the grocery store. Well, just help your neighbor out and buy from your neighbor. Perhaps you can even plant a garden in your home. There are plenty of trees in my grandma's backyard of pana, of mangoes, of canepas, and we ate those for snacks instead of going to the store. These are small things that can produce big changes if more people apply them to their everyday lives. Other changes that can be done on a larger scale is for the people of Puerto Rico to be passionate about getting rid of just one energy provider that is based mostly off coal, 90% actually. So PREPA is the energy provider. And when Hurricane Maria hit, the infrastructure was completely destroyed, and it wasn't even good in the first place. So what happened most recently is there was a Puerto Rico Energy Public Policy Act that was put into effect that says that PREPA has to obtain 40% of electricity from renewable resources by 2025 and then 100% by 2050. Well, what if Puerto Rico allowed for other energy providers that were more economically friendly, such as hydro or wind and solar? Puerto Rico, it's feasible to have hydro energy. It's near water. All of it's near water. Wind, how much breeze do you get from living by the sea? And then solar. Although it may not be as feasible to just do solar because of the lack of land, and we can actually help to push that for individuals in their homes, but having another energy provider that is more friendly towards the environment can also help. So get together, do strikes, push for something like that, and enforce that act. So what things are put in place? Write your local governor to see what is in place to ensure that this is put into effect. Another thing is we talked about coral bleaching. There's also a thing called coral planting, like planting a garden. And what that does is help revive the corals that are dying within that area. And what that does, it can actually produce some jobs. It increases the fishes and the wildlife that were impacted there, and can actually, bring in more food, such as crabs and fish and different things like that, that was excluded, or that was diminished because of coral bleaching. So these are things that can be done on a larger scale if the people of Puerto Rico got together and pushed for these things to be put into effect. It is my hope and desire that everything that we went through in this presentation helped you see how Puerto Rico is affected by climate change. Actually, it has been identified as the most impacted population due to climate change based on loss of GDP and loss of lives in the most recent 2 decades, according to some research that was done in 2019. So hopefully this stirs up a passion for those Puerto Ricans who care about their island and care about their families and friends and perhaps where they grew up or even their heritage for those who've never been there. It's very important to preserve the lives of those in the history of the beautiful island and people of Puerto Rico.